The story begins with a land torn between faith and fire, where the earth trembled under the march of warriors who carried the cross upon their shields and the flame of belief in their hearts. In the midst of this tide of steel and dust there rose a man whose name would echo through the ages, Godfrey of Bouillon, a knight of noble birth, yet greater in spirit than in wealth. His soul was forged not in halls of ease but in the furnace of devotion to the Holy Sepulchre. The age was one of chaos when kings vied for crowns and lords for lands, but the call of Jerusalem rang louder than all. It was the voice of a city sacred to three faiths, the voice of a land promised and yet broken, held and yet divided. The cry went out across Europe to take up the cross, to march to the east and wrest the holy places from those who barred the way. Godfrey answered not as one chasing glory but as one bound by duty. He sold his lands, he gave up inheritance, he cast aside comfort, and with his brothers and fellow knights he took the oath to journey across mountains and rivers, deserts and seas. His frame was tall, his presence stern, his eyes calm yet burning with faith. He was a man of the sword yet guided by prayer. His banner was not his own name but the cause of Christendom. The march of the Crusaders was long, and bitter hunger gnawed, thirst burned, disease crept into the camps. Men fell by the wayside, the bones whitening the paths, yet still the march went on, and Godfrey stood firm when others faltered. He gave bread to the weak, he lent courage to the fearful, he kept the oath when others broke theirs. At last the Crusaders reached the gates of Jerusalem. The city rose before them like a jewel of stone and sun, its towers high, its walls thick. The air was heavy with prophecy, for here kings had ruled, prophets had spoken, and empires had clashed. Now the knights of the cross gathered like a storm around its walls. The summer sun blazed merciless, yet the hearts of the Crusaders blazed brighter. Godfrey stood at the forefront, his sword lifted, his gaze fixed. Heaven itself seemed to watch as the storm broke. Siege towers rolled forward, ladders rose, arrows darkened the sky, blood spilled like rain upon the stones, yet through smoke and shouting, through the crash of wood and steel, the Crusaders pressed onward. And when the moment came, it was Godfrey who mounted the wall, who planted the cross in victory. Jerusalem had fallen, and the cry of triumph shook the air. But when the lords of the crusade would have made him king, Godfrey refused. He said, I will not wear a crown of gold in the city where my Savior wore a crown of thorns. He would be known instead as defender of the Holy Sepulchre, a title born not of pride but of humility. He walked the streets of the city not as a ruler seeking honor but as a servant seeking duty. The people of the Crusader kingdom loved him for this. He was stern in justice yet merciful in judgment. He guarded the churches, he protected the pilgrims, he gave order to the land torn by conquest. His reign was not of peace alone, for enemies gathered on all sides. The Saracens did not rest, they struck from the deserts, they came with horse and spear. Godfrey rode to meet them again and again, his sword flashed in battle, his courage never dimmed. He was the shield of his people and the terror of his foes. He did not shrink from hardship, he did not waver in faith. The name of Godfrey spread among friend and enemy alike. The faithful saw in him the image of a knight sanctified, the unbelievers saw in him a foe who could not be broken. Yet Godfrey was no brute warrior alone, he was a man of prayer and fast. He sought counsel with priests and monks, he knelt in the church of the Holy Sepulchre where light streamed through the stones and silence carried the weight of eternity. He believed his victories came not from his own arm but from the will of God. His humility set him apart, for in an age when men carved the names in blood, he sought only to carve his in devotion. The months passed and the kingdom slowly began to take root. Castles rose on hills, fortresses along the roads, pilgrims returned to walk the holy paths, merchants came with wares, scholars wrote of wonders, yet the shadow of war never lifted. Godfrey knew his crownless throne was a fragile one. He fought tirelessly to secure alliances, to bind the lords together, to prepare for the storms that would surely come, and always he carried himself not as a king of conquest but as a servant of faith. His heart beat with the same fire that had led him across continents to this holy city. His voice carried the same calm that had steadied men in despair. His hand bore the same sword that had cut a path through walls and enemies alike. But though his body was strong, the weight of toil and war bore upon him. The deserts drained strength, the endless campaigns stole years. Still he pressed on, refusing rest for the sake of the cause. His eyes saw beyond his own life to the survival of the kingdom itself, and when he fell ill in the year 1100, it was as though the heart of Jerusalem itself trembled. The people prayed, the knights watched by his side, the priests lifted their voices, yet fate could not be denied. Godfrey breathed his last not in defeat but in fulfillment, for he had seen the city delivered. He had walked its streets as its defender, he had secured the holy places for those who came after. When he died, the grief of Jerusalem was vast. Bells tolled through the air, men wept, women lamented, pilgrims spoke his name with reverence, knights lowered their banners in silence. He was laid to rest in the church of the Holy Sepulchre, the very heart of the city he had defended. His tomb became a shrine, not of stone alone but of memory, for Godfrey was not merely a ruler, not merely a warrior, he was the embodiment of a dream. He was the knight who rose when all seemed lost, who gave hope where despair reigned, who wore humility as his crown and faith as his sword. And so his name lived on through the years. Stories grew around him, songs were sung, chronicles painted him as the model of the Christian knight. His image became a standard for all who came after. Kings sought to be like him, knights swore by his deeds, pilgrims whispered his name in prayer, enemies remembered his sword with dread. Though he reigned for but a year, his spirit reigned for centuries. Godfrey of Bouillon became more than man, he became legend, he became the soul of Jerusalem. After the death of Godfrey, the echo of his life did not fade, it spread like waves across the world. His body may have been lowered into stone, yet his spirit rose higher than the towers of Jerusalem. The people of the kingdom spoke his name with reverence and awe, for though his reign had been brief, it had been a reign of purity, of fire and of devotion. He had entered the city with sword in hand, but he had refused to enter it with a crown of gold. That act of humility carved him into the hearts of the people stronger than any jewel could. Godfrey was remembered not only for his battles but for his soul. In the courts of Europe his story was told in halls lit by torches where lords and knights gathered. Knights who had never seen the East still whispered of the man who had carried the cross upon his shield and victory upon his shoulders. They spoke of how he had scaled the walls of Jerusalem with the fury of a lion and yet bowed in prayer as gentle as a monk. They told how he had turned away the glory of kingship to take instead the burden of guardianship, and so even among those who had not marched with him his name was exalted as the perfect knight. But the East was not silent. His enemies remembered him as well. The Saracens who had crossed swords with him spoke of his courage. They feared his charge, yet they honored his strength. They knew him as a foe who fought without fear, who did not turn his back even when surrounded. They remembered the moment when his sword carved through their lines like fire through dry grass. They spoke in their tents of the knight who was not a king yet commanded as one. They did not curse him, they respected him, for in war there is honor, and Godfrey had it. The kingdom that Godfrey left was fragile, yet his spirit lingered to strengthen it. His brother Baldwin took the crown, yet all knew it was the shadow of Godfrey that guarded the city. The towers of Jerusalem seemed to stand taller because of him. The streets echoed with the steps of pilgrims who felt safe because his memory still walked with them. Priests sang his name in their hymns, monks prayed at his tomb, knights touched their swords to his grave before riding to battle. The people saw in him not a man who had passed but a guardian who remained. Legends began to form around his deeds. Some said angels had fought beside him at the walls of Jerusalem. Some said the sky had opened when he lifted his sword. Some swore that the holy lance had guided his hand. Others whispered that when he prayed in silence the very stones of the sepulchre glowed with light. Whatever truth lay behind the tales, it did not matter, for the people needed a hero, and Godfrey was more than hero. He was the soul of their hope. As the years passed, his story became woven into song. Minstrels sang of his courage in castles far from the Holy Land. Children listened with wide eyes as they heard of the knight who refused a crown. Lovers spoke his name in candlelight as a symbol of faith stronger than death. His memory crossed seas, it moved across continents. Kings envied his glory, knights dreamed of his valor. Even in lands where his language was unknown, his story was carried by pilgrims who had seen his tomb. They told of a man tall and stern yet humble, a man who fought with fire and prayed with tears, a man who had stood at the heart of the holiest city on earth and had given it new life. What set Godfrey apart was not the battles he fought alone, for many knights had fought battles. What set him apart was that his sword was guided by humility and his heart by faith. He did not seek thrones, he did not seek wealth, he did not seek fame, he sought only to serve. That is why the people loved him, that is why they wept when he died, that is why his name endured long after kingdoms rose and fell. His humility was his crown, his faith was his fortress, his devotion was his legacy. And yet his story did not end with his death, for in every knight who took up the cross afterward there was a spark of Godfrey. In every pilgrim who set foot on the path to Jerusalem there was a whisper of his name. In every prayer said at the Holy Sepulchre there was the memory of the man who had defended it. His soul became part of the land itself, it mingled with the stones, it breathed with the winds, it lived in the holy fire of faith. His life became a bridge between man and legend, his death became a seed from which countless stories would grow. Generations later, when pilgrims came to his tomb, they felt the presence of a guardian. Some swore that in the stillness of night they heard the sound of his sword striking against shield. Others said they felt a hand of courage upon their shoulders urging them forward. Many believed that as long as his name was spoken, Jerusalem would never be forsaken, for he had bound his soul to the city not with chains of flesh but with bonds of eternal devotion. The people of the kingdom called him the first defender, the first guardian, the true knight of Jerusalem. And though kings sat on thrones, though dynasties rose and fell, though lords quarreled and armies clashed, none could take from him that place. For Godfrey was more than a king, he was more than a lord. He was the light in the darkness, he was the voice in the silence, he was the warrior who knelt, he was the servant who ruled. In the end his story rose beyond time, for when men seek the image of the perfect knight, they see Godfrey. When they dream of a warrior without pride yet full of power, they dream of Godfrey. When they hope for a ruler who turns away gold yet takes up burden, they hope for Godfrey. He became a mirror of the highest ideals of his age and of all ages. His name is written not only in chronicles but in the hearts of those who believe in honor. Thus the tale of Godfrey of Bouillon closes not with his death but with his immortality, for though his body lies in the sepulchre, his spirit stands watch over Jerusalem forever. The towers still rise, the stones still gleam, the pilgrims still come, and though centuries pass, his presence lingers like a flame that will not die. In every clash of swords, in every prayer at dawn, in every step of a weary pilgrim, his name is there. He is Godfrey, the defender of the sepulchre, the knight without a crown, the ruler without pride, the warrior without fear. And so he lives not as a figure lost in dust but as a legend carved in light. His legacy is the strength of faith, his crown is the humility of service, his victory is the survival of memory. He rose from the earth of Europe, he crossed seas and deserts, he broke the walls of Jerusalem, and in the end he built not only a kingdom of stone but a kingdom of remembrance. His name is sung still and it will be sung forever, for Godfrey of Bouillon is not dead, he is eternal. He is the spirit of Jerusalem, he is the heart of the Crusader dream, he is the knight who will never be forgotten.